you all for being here. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 5:15, Tuesday, August 13th. We are here to meet for Metro Arts Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity. We are currently at the Nashville Public Library, the Bordeaux branch. I do not have the land acknowledgement in front of me. So I apologize for that. I do take that very seriously. So my apologies for not having that. But yeah, welcome everyone to the meeting today. At this point, we will move forward to the public comment. Oh yeah, now that I will read it. Backing up, we will not move to public comment yet. I will read the land acknowledgement. Metro Arts stands and holds space on the unceded and sovereign lands of the Cherokee East, Yuchi, and Shawnee peoples who have stewarded it for generations. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes and hope for a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. We acknowledge that we are standing on ancestral lands, and we honor the thousands of enslaved African peoples whose lives were physically and spiritually stolen. We pay respects to elders past and present. Metro Arts invites you to join our commitment to knowing our Native communities in more meaningful ways in alignment with our restorative arts practice. Thank you. At this point, we'd like to move on to the public comment section. Did we receive any public comments prior to the meeting? Okay, there were no public comments received prior to today's meeting. I don't see anyone in the audience in attendance for public comment, but if I will give space for that if someone were to appear suddenly. Alrighty, with that being said, we'll move on to the approval of last meeting's minutes. Thank you all for sending that out prior to today's meeting. And for those of you on the committee, you will find that in your packet.
I just have one edit. I think, Camille, did you specifically name who you were citing when we were defining the equity statement? I thought there was a name.
Yeah, I had it first.
I just wanted that to be named into the notes because someone else's labor participated in the making of that. So I know it's super small, but that was my one thing.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. I can provide the citation if that's helpful.
Awesome, thank you all. So it sounds like Camille will provide a citation to rectify the meeting minutes from last meeting. Are there any other changes or comments on the meeting minutes? Awesome. I guess I will make a motion to approve last meeting's meeting minutes with the citation added from Camille. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Lefowitz. And all those in favor, say aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. So that concludes our meeting minutes section. We'll now move on to action items, to agenda items D, including action items and discussion. At this point, we will kind of pick up and we can kind of go back and review where we're at in terms of our equity definition. Here in person and on the screen, you'll see the working definition that we have for equity. I know there are a few comments that staff received on this definition that we can discuss today, and hopefully we can leave here today, I think, in a good place that we feel strongly about this definition. So yeah, I guess I'll kind of look towards Josiah to see how we want to address the comments sent in.
If it's okay with the committee, what we can do, we received 2 sets of comments from 2 individuals. I can go through the comments and specify what the suggestions were, and then we'll leave that to the floor for you all to discuss. If it was your comment, there's no, we just invited you to. Since we sent the email, since we BCC you all to the emails, we receive the comments and share them, if at all, as anonymous. But you're more than welcome to speak on behalf of your own comment or speak to it, especially if there's anything that in just sharing it, I don't appropriate. If you've changed your mind or if something is. If you want to make sure it's fully understood how you communicated it. But if that's okay with the committee, I'll just provide the comments from the first email we received, and then we can discuss that. I could provide the comments from the second email. So the first email, Claudia, will you read our statement once more, just to refresh everyone, and so that it's also heard from anyone who's viewing this or who'll watch it in the future?
Sure, I can do that. And just to refresh and clarify, this is the definition that Josiah and I made some minor edits to, and then requested feedback from per our last meeting. So our working definition so far is Metro Arts defines equity as the practices and policies that ensure all Nashville artists, arts organizations, and communities have just access to resources such as funding, programming, calls for art, and other opportunities and creative experiences. Equity means acknowledging, addressing, and eliminating past, present, and potential structural inequities in Metro Nashville that benefit historically privileged groups of people and exclude historically exploited groups of people.
Thank you, Claudia. So the first set of comments we received, the first point that it makes is it suggests adding a sentence in the form of the following, quote, inequities create an unnatural top-down model of funding, resources, and opportunities, and perpetuates a meritocracy model. Equity reverses that top-down model and also revokes meritocracy in the arts. Then, and they specifically advise including that too, because of also the specificity with which it references the arts in general, is how we're putting together this definition and this language. And then the second of the 3 suggestions was was concerning the word exclude. The suggestion is that there's maybe more precise language. They bring up the point that, for example, the term segregation, how that's a very specific word for specific government actions and activities, and then the results of it, how clear that is as far as something to use. So that's the second point. And then the third suggestion of the 3 would be to include the word or keep the I think it's been discussed before, but the term exploit, as opposed to only focusing on benefit for certain groups of people. Using the term exploit, the point is that it specifically considers the situation of artists or people who are willingly or unwillingly or knowingly or unknowingly put in this situation or exploited. And so those are, and I can repeat these three phrases too. I can also forward them to Chuck so that he can provide a visual for us on the screen. But those are the first. That's the first set of suggestions. And then, yes, and Chuck, while I'm doing this, I'm also going to email this to you also. Do you have access? Send it to you. Thank you, reminding me of who has the laptop. One moment.
While Josiah's doing that, I'll thank Tessa Ortiz-Marsh for being here, representing Metro Legal. Just thanks for showing up today.
Okay, so once more, I've sent that to you. Once more, the first proposed change is adding a sentence reading as inequities create an unnatural top-down model of funding, resources, and opportunities, and perpetuates a meritocracy model. Equity reverses that top-down model and revokes meritocracy in the arts. The second is a critique of using the term exploit as opposed to a term like segregation. And the third is including the term. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The second critique is using the word exclude as opposed to a term like segregation. And then the third is to that point is considering to use the word exploit because of the situation of the persons concerned in that statement. So the second is more of a two-parter. It's critiquing the term exclude, and then it's suggesting the word exploit. And I can go forward, and since I've sent the comments to Chuck, I can also, just so we have everything, all the notes on the table, I can also go ahead and provide what the second email we received, what the critique was or the suggestions were, and basically that note suggested a reframing of the second sentence as equity means, as quote, equity means acknowledging and correcting past, addressing present, and eliminating potential structural inequities in Metro Nashville. And the inclusion of as far as the term Metro Nashville, the concern that was raised is basically a question. Is the intent to affect change for the city, Metro Nashville, or is CARE's intention towards the arts community of Metro Nashville? Quote, that benefit historically privileged groups of people and exclude historically exploited groups of people. So I'll restate that one more time. Their notes as far as like the second sentence of what the current draft we have is, equity means acknowledging and correcting past, addressing present, and eliminating potential structural inequities. And then the question is, and in terms of the phrase or the term Metro Nashville, whether the intent is to affect change for the city, Metro Nashville, or intention towards specifically the arts community of Metro Nashville.
Chuck, could you make Because I'm older, the font, thanks.
So I can start. I was the first commenter, and I think where I was coming from was I think that there needs to be an explanation for why we are advocating for equity, because I think we lose focus and sight of why we're advocating for it, and that's why I was requesting that there be a line about the top-down model and the meritocracy that we see in Nashville, and acknowledging that harm first, and then going into what is equity. So why is it important? Because we have a very unnatural system right now of how funding is happening, and then going into that definition. To the second email, I just want to add, I don't think that we can separate artists from Metro Nashville. So that's why I think it's very important to say Metro Nashville. There may be artists who require, who have housing issues, or who may have transportation issues. So I want this to also be reflective of the community, and not separating the artist from the multiple identities an artist can have in Nashville. And then last thing, I will just advocate for the first line to take out the word all Nashville artists. I think, well, I'm very pro all Nashville artists, but the arts organizations just, it just seems contradictory to me to have something about equity and then we're making everybody happy. To me, that's not equity driven. And it's not realistic of what equity works looks like if we're saying everyone's going to get something, and then we're talking about and acknowledging exploitation and saying everyone's going to be happy at the end of this. So yeah, I would advocate if that all cannot be reflected. Well, I'll just say I just don't like the all there as much.
I guess and I'm just kind of throwing this out there for feedback. I hear what you're saying about Metro Nashville and using that term. For me, I'm hesitant to, I just wonder if there's a way that we can word that to basically accomplish what you said, but also clarifying that we're responsible to the arts community. Just because there are other, I'm just thinking about last meeting when we were taking inspiration from some of the work done, like from schools, and that was, that was their work that this for Metro schools, but it's relevant across the board. But I guess for this body, we're, I guess, being held accountable to the arts community. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can word that to say somehow that not just the artists themselves, but as it relates to their experience in Metro Nashville.
My quick suggestion for that would be structural inequities in Metro Nashville that benefit historically privileged groups of artists and exclude historically exploited groups of artists, maybe.
Molly, I see that as a good step forward. I would say we serve all communities, even people who aren't artists, in terms of the way that they encounter art. They might not identify as an artist. So a big tent view there seems...
We can then say historically privileged communities and artists and exclude historically exploited communities and artists, potentially.
Can I ask, can we go back and I'm trying to remember from last meeting, Trey, and everyone, just what we thought this definition, we wanted to make it operational. But then if we come to an agreement on this is, we imagine this will be sent to the commission. What's the path, I guess? I cannot remember if we discussed or what happens with this definition.
Yeah, I think that the intention was that we could look at this definition and kind of use it as a check for anything that the commission does in terms of programming or projects or funding, and that if we felt like the work being brought to the commission had to basically be held accountable to this definition, that it would be a good tool to kind of put up and say, okay, this is equitable in the way that we're moving the programming or in the way that other policies might be written.
Yeah, I guess what I meant is it kind of like sending something, like presenting something to them. Would they need to, I mean, is this an internal to care in terms of, like, for example, when we get the grants information, which we will soon, will we use this definition to help us think about the feedback that we will provide on that? Or is this something that goes to the larger commission, goes up on the website, becomes like the way we talk about it? Do you know what the distinction?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess I would hope that we would take this definition once we've agreed upon it to commission in hopes that they would adopt it or kind of sign off on it, and then it would become kind of a guide for the greater commission, not just what we do in care. Mm-hmm. But I'm open to other thoughts about that. I guess one thing I'm Lydia, something you said that I'm thinking about is that use of the word all. Sorry, I don't mean to move on. There's just a lot of thoughts at once. And maybe how do we, well, I hear what you're saying about, advocating for all, given that some of these, if we say all, there's a number of people who might be part of the oppressive, practices that we're trying to help fight against. Is there a way that we can word that to be more accountability as well, and not just because it would affect everyone. I don't know, maybe I'm tripping over my words, but those who are the oppressors and the oppressed, I guess, in this situation would need to be held accountable to this statement. So maybe there's other ways that we can call that out without using the term all. And I guess my other worry, and please feel free to speak also.
It's okay, go ahead. Go ahead, no.
My other worry is that we're getting a little large with this definition. We're starting to, because we could say a lot, and it could be a really long definition, which maybe that's a good thing, but yeah.
So I wanted to ask, Lydia, is striking the word all sufficient?
I think it's better. Yeah, I think it's better. But
I
me think
understand,
about it.
yeah, I
Yeah,
understand you want to say enough, but we don't want to say so much that the message really kind of gets lost. So I agree. What I love about what we have and what we're talking about is that it's concise, it's pointed, it's simple, it's understandable. So I really like the direction we're heading in. So that's all. I just wanted to.
I would like to suggest that instead of using all, that we consider perhaps saying historically omitted or overlooked Nashville artists, arts organizations, and communities.
And I think on your second comment, Lydia, I like that it says privileged groups of people and maybe change the definition a little, because the privileged people also include the audience members that go to, you know, the arts programming of privileged organizations. So it's not just the artists, it's not just the organizations. It also includes the audiences, some privileged, some who are exploited, some who are totally ignored.
I'm not typing because I don't hear everybody, but I don't want to go back and forth like we did last time of deleting and this and when we got the small screen. So if you want to say those words and then second it, third it, not officially with the Robert's rules, but at least conversation, then I can do it versus going back and forth, if that's okay.
Are we trying to meet a deadline in finalizing?
There's not a hard deadline, but, you know, I think we are.
I know we don't want to take forever.
Right.
But I don't see any reason why it can't be a living document just for a little.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
Contemplation.
you know, there's a commission meeting this week, and it's not on the agenda, so we're not racing to get something to put forward for a commission this week, if that helps.
Yeah, no, I know we're trying to be very conscientious.
I also think it might be interesting to that point to prototype or experiment with this definition specifically as it might relate to a real thing that we will look at. And that might be, you know, what is coming our way. And then we can see, right? That's been my experience, is that that's a great opportunity. So this is like a prototype or a draft or a working definition, and let's try it, you know, and apply it to what we have to look at and see how helpful a tool it is, and that might indicate if we want to revise.
I'm not saying something very important. I just don't have a mic over there. But along those same lines, obviously we're going to try to work on another definition, the one for the term anti-racism. But on speaking to what you were saying, Lydia, or any other ones that suggested in the emails for the addition stuff, is that, again, I'm just throwing this out here as trying to follow along and help facilitate in some degree, but is that more or less of definition and more of applying the changes in the guidelines for the next step, if that was to happen? You know, it kind of seems like in the last meeting we were talking about, like there's dominoes that, you know, are related, and that would be the next step in the process of any change, if there is change. So just throwing that out there, if it's less about the definition and more including those things in the application of the guidelines, like you spoke of the hypothetical grant stuff.
I mean, we could, if we are using the approach of kind of like prototyping, have two versions, you know, so add in, you know, have this and then have another version with the suggested additions, and we could sit with it. And then we could also, again, prototype it. That way those additions aren't lost or not considered. They're captured. but then we could see, again, perhaps, Chuck, I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but I've been in things like this before where then when we actually used it, we were like, oh no, we need like 5 words and then a paragraph underneath, right, that explains. So that could be where we land, or, so I'm not opposed to keeping this, maybe adding a couple of sentences at the bottom that are like in parentheses or something around suggested kind of things, and then moving to accept that and try it.
We do have an equity statement on our website. I don't know what the logistics around updating or adding things to that would be, but I'm wondering if that is where some of those things could live.
I think that sounds like a good idea. I do think that maybe I do like the idea of adding, I think this is coming from Lydia's recommendation, and maybe it's not exactly copy paste, but maybe defining what equity is not, and kind of highlighting what we consider to be inequities that are impacting our community, and just, you know, because I think we do I think part of our definition of equity involves inequities. So I think that might be something that would be helpful potentially to insert. Sorry, you mind scrolling back up? Maybe before we, like, up to the definition, maybe. Before we say what equity means, maybe we say what the inequities are. I'm curious to know how you all feel about that.
Just from staff perspective, I will say that I do understand the points made about how helpful it can be to have a precise language, specific and precise language that doesn't sugarcoat things, but also is effective and can that can flow, and that doesn't bog down the reader and risk distracting. And so I think also to that point is important. I think one of the difficulties that organizations and entities navigate in figuring out language and using and operating with language based on equity is that equity isn't the same as equality. And a lot of us have grown up hearing equality all the time, and then you at some point receive the language to recognize that equality doesn't give, the promises aren't fulfilled. And so you need more specificity, and you have to have a sense of history, which is where how equity can operate. And at the same time, you have to figure out, as you negotiate and navigate organizations, how are you making sure to address that in a way that you can also lay steps for where things should start and what actions need to take place right here and right now. That's just what I'm going to present to you all to consider. I want to reiterate the point. I think several of you all discussed it, but I definitely remember Terry saying how concise and precise it is doesn't mean that you should risk omitting an important understanding of a sense of history, but that needs to be streamlined in a way into the language where it can speak to what CARE and the commission aspire to do right now.
When you were talking, Josiah, I was thinking about different kinds of language that the organization uses. And so there's vision, kind of mission, philosophical kind of language, which this strikes me, I think is that. And then there's branding, right? Like Metro Arts, the 5-sentence thing underneath it, whatever. And then there's like governance language, right? Which is bylaws and code, and you know how that happens. And I think just being clear about those are different things, but ideally they'd be in alignment. And there are places maybe if they are in alignment, if that can happen, which is a process, a long process, then it can be reflected in all kinds of various ways, even visually, right? Or in different ways. So these are words, but this can be communicated in lots of different ways, I guess.
I want to add a comment, and I am open to the idea of, I think it was brought up, of just like letting this be the prototype and you know, working with it. But I didn't send a comment earlier, but I would say for the second sentence, part of me is just kind of getting caught on the benefits, historically privileged group of people in that sort of sentence. And I feel that that could make it sound as though to achieve equity, our goal is to take away privilege from some people in a way to equalize it. Whereas I would rather make sure we are framing it as, hey, we're trying to create a fair environment for all. And that means like the conditions are fair, right? And so it doesn't advantage anybody or disadvantage anybody, you know? And so I think, and maybe I'm getting into the weeds here, but I liked how I think one of the MMPS definitions was inequities that disadvantage certain group of people, or that advantage certain groups of people and disadvantage others. I think that's broad enough to kind of cover different types of inequity that may come up, while still kind of getting at the idea of fairness versus, you know, some people are, you know, it could be, there's times in historically exploited groups may be the ones that are benefiting more than others. And so I think it's, anyway, another way of wording it that could help cover this better.
I wanted to build on what Fatia was saying about the first line. Sorry to jump around, but I think maybe to restructure that first sentence, instead of saying policies that ensure, we can say policies that repair, and then just take out all Nashville. We could keep the all if people want, because I think people who are oppressing other people also need repair. But yeah, so I think it may just be in that word ensure that the issue can be solved as repair. I'll say I don't like the terms advantage and disadvantage. I think they neutralize what's happening. I think people who have exploited other people have to be ready to give something up. And I think that's what equity is, because they took it unfairly. You can't steal something from me and then expect not to give it back. So that would just be my pushback there, was I do like language that is very direct and very honest to what's happening.
Yeah, point taken. I appreciate that framing as well. I think in some ways I'm suggesting the advantage disadvantage only because, you know, even to rectify inequity, we can't, I think, considering Supreme Court decisions, whatnot, we can't, like, the way we can do that now is by making the environment better, but we can't, now we're more limited on doing something that can advantage a historically exploited group, right? And so I feel like, I don't know, I think we might just have to be more careful of our language there in terms of what we could actually do.
See, I feel like this is more like an aspirational statement, and some of the suggestions we have are more action item type things. I like the first sentence, maybe take out all, but I wish we had a better definition, and Fatia, you said it better for exclude historically exploited groups, because that people might think used to be exploited. No, they're still exploited. And some groups aren't exploited, but they're still left out, ignored. I know even in one anti-racism training, when I asked why there was nothing about indigenous people, I was told because that population is insignificantly populous enough to be included in the research, right? So not an exploited group, but definitely ignored group. So that's where I would like to see better definitions. But to me, we're getting more into the how we use it than just the philosophical statement of what the equity statement is. But
Again, I think make a big tent for this, like in terms of trying it and adding some of the things, and let's actually try it and see how it works in real time. I'm not trying to pass the buck. It can be one of those things that we may continue to have thoughts, and it should be a living thing, but let's add the stuff in and then try it. I don't know. That's my thought.
I like the first sentence as well, and but I do agree with replacing the word all. But I also like the idea of adding something perhaps in there, adding a sentence in there that does speak to repairing, which I think that was a good idea.
How do you all feel about maybe saying something like the greater Nashville arts community? Is that, I don't know, I'm just workshopping how do we replace all, and you could almost even say creative community, because it's not just those who define as artists, or I don't know,
But that speaks more to the demographic, well, not the demographic, but the geographic
Right.
space versus what you're trying to say in there. So that sentence speaks more to those who have been overlooked, those who did not receive. So adding, maybe being more specific with that type of wording, that's who that sentence is addressing in a sense. But perhaps to say greater Nashville, though, because you want to make sure it's broad enough. It's not just city Nashville, but also, our outskirts as well.
could we change addressing to repairing? Or adding repairing in that sentence? Acknowledging, addressing, repairing, and eliminating?
do we maybe change eliminating to repair? Does that I guess, I don't know.
Well, we're
I don't
trying to
know.
eliminate current and potential future.
I guess I'm just wondering if is eliminating part of the reparation. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just. I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking if I have to repair something on my car, I would. First thing you do is like get rid of it, and then you. I don't,
People aren't cars.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just a analogy.
So when you say addressing it, what do you mean? Do you mean repairing harm or just acknowledging?
Well,
it,
I guess addressing is more so. Yeah, you're right. It's. I don't know. It's
You can address
it's like
it. Harm is
we're getting
happening.
really deep. Like, how do you define
Right.
repair?
I think acknowledging and addressing are two different things. It's like you acknowledge, and then the next step is to address it, and then perhaps adding in there repairing and eliminating, or repairing and or eliminating.
But yes, I definitely think add repair.
For me, it's like just breaking down, but acknowledgement, like what Tia was just saying, acknowledgement is awareness, addressing is action, and then the eliminating is the repairing. So it's kind of like just wordplay of whatever y'all want to have specifics. If that's the definition in one sentence in the beginning and adding more for how it's used in the application. But I'm fine with whatever y'all decide on that.
I'm also thinking it might be helpful. I know one of the suggestions that we got in the feedback kind of restructured that second sentence, and maybe it could be something like repairing past, eliminating present or potential. Maybe we could like be more specific about what we're doing kind of at each. Yeah.
So the second one was mine. And the reason for the restructuring is because eliminating with past bothers me, because we can't eliminate what's been done, but we can acknowledge, address, repair. We can take action that is, that flows backwards. So that's why I suggested it that way.
But can we eliminate potential? Would it fit more with potential?
Anywhere but except in front of past.
So that's where I guess the and/or might come in, because then it's either or, so maybe and/or eliminating past, present, and/or potential. The art of articles. I don't know. It's the English major in me.
You know, I'm really connecting with, I'm sorry, whoever I cut off, with the idea of workshopping this with real-time examples, because what I'm a little, emotionally connected to is making sure we have a broad enough or a loud enough voice, and it's voice beyond the people in the room here. And so applying it to examples, situations allows us to hear voices from whatever that situation is.
I just wanted to jump in and say that I am capturing these things in notes, and Chuck we can add them back in once we've like narrowed it down a little. But yeah, you don't see it up there, but I've got it in here.
To Commissioner McCormick's point, and I'm sorry. That's okay. No, you're right. Did I address you incorrectly? Oh, okay. And also it brings to mind something Commissioner Lefkowitz suggested. And it goes to what, as a staff person, again, I think we've interpreted as one of the things that members of CARE have done in the past, and that current members of CARE aspire to do going forward, is leading engagement of what's going on with Metro with the community and helping to facilitate that. So in thinking about, I think it's worth considering the point about the workshopping what is being done in these public meetings and opportunities where we can provide access to the communities to be able to provide feedback and thoughts and suggestions, and how that might also coincide with the living document proposal, as that makes space for you to have language Metro to have something to look to, but also as it's being improved, there's also space where it is being accessed by people outside of this room. And that way, when it is going through the typical channels of government where it's adopted as a part of the guidelines or depending on what the commission's relationship to it is, we know the community has had eyes on it and been able to actively see it and participate and be heard.
I also, to that point, like when you're talking about community stuff, I know I'm being strange here about that language, but this can also be, it can be expressed in multiple ways. We have artists who might help us, like, what would this, like, look like visually? You know, what story, what would be a story about this? You know, like different things. I'm getting out there, I know. But because this is not language of governance, right, we can be creative in inviting a community to actually think, like, what does this look like? What does it sound like? What does the story, that I think could be interesting and powerful too.
I guess, Heather, I'm kind of asking a question. Excuse me, sorry, Commissioner Lefowitz. Do we try to, I'm thinking about, I attended that coffee talk, and I know that there was some kind of engagement that we were offering. Do we maybe find more strategy in calling people in and you know, maybe that we're asking, you know, more specifically versus like, you know, obviously we say we want to make this more accessible. Public comment is kind of your space, and you know, we're here again, and there's no one else here, and maybe we're just more specific about how we call people in, and because the coffee talks have been really helpful to just connect with people. You meet a lot of different types of artists, different creatives, people who are just curious. And I wonder if we might, you know, build upon that and kind of connect the two and say, we're working on this definition, and we want to have an open discussion about it, and we want to hear from people, you know, and then, you know, maybe there's an activity or something that we do in that space. And maybe this is where I also lean into legal about, you know, having that conversation in a community setting that's not necessarily having this you know what I'm saying? If that makes sense.
So obviously, the non-commissioned members of this committee can have conversations because the Open Meetings Act doesn't necessarily apply to them. If it would be two or more commissioners part of that conversation that is progressing business of the Arts Commission, that would be an open meetings subject to the Open Meetings Act. So
hypothetically, if we were to, you know, have that on as a topic for the next coffee talk or something, you know, then as long as we don't show up together, then, you know, it could be pretty open and.
Yeah, and I think even if you wanted to do something like have an open forum time on the agenda and notice that and use, you know, the PR channels and Instagram and things like that to invite people to a care committee and have a discussion with a broader group, that would be appropriate as well. But if a coffee talk time is more accessible to artists given their schedule, then just being mindful that two or more commissioners progressing arts business is subject to the Open Meetings Act.
But in that we're talking about a public gathering, just is there a way to frame it that we're not deliberating so that no one is left out of the circle?
So I'd have to get more clarity specifically to what the intent of care committees' definitions of equity are going to be going forward. It seems as if it is the intent that this committee take this to the full commission for some type of ratification, and that would be viewed as deliberating towards business of the commission. There are some exceptions to the Open Meetings Act of chance interactions and meetings with appointed people, commissioners, council members, et cetera. But even then, case law says you can't have a chance meeting and then discuss business of a council or commission or a board.
I guess I almost see there's like benefit in it not being involved with commissioners, and kind of, as long as it is able to translate here, as long as we're able to receive the message, if that makes sense. I don't know. And I think we talked about our team a little bit, and Josiah was kind of really kind of picking my brain about that and just how our team operated. And I wasn't able to remember for sure, but I don't think that our team and CARE existed at the same time. It was like one and then the other. But it's almost like if that model were to exist where they would coexist, and there could be some like translation of, it might be more productive to get community feedback versus have their because we also discuss, public comment is not necessarily a conversation in these settings. It's more of a formal way to have your voice heard in a public meeting, but we don't typically have a back and forth dialogue.
I think this is an opportunity for, to the point of Tessa's advice, and thinking about when does engagement become business, and what is the end game for the definition? Because it can be a series of like listening to community members, but also if you want to actualize that, if you want to try to realize some agency with what with your respective communities and the people that already trust you and listen to the membership of CARE, and then what they might provide for CARE in this capacity that could actually inform something that is brought to the commission to adopt, or even be used to inform how we look at future programs, or how you analyze, how the commission analyzes the effectiveness and the equity of future of things that it'll vote on in the future. Then it is important to be able to like frame what engagement might look like, because one meeting, it may just be pure listening and receiving information. And in another meeting, it could get closer to, okay, this actually bears on the business. This will actually possibly be used and voted on and then move forward. So being able to just frame that intention, big picture, and then in these increments with however you all, if you decide to move forward with this engagement element, which I think makes absolute sense. And that was the spirit of our team. And then ideally it was part of the spirit of CARE. But I think that's important. And as staff, we're more than willing to help you think about that and frame that and figure out how that also coincides with what our limitations are also, like in going through the legislative process and complying with state law.
But would our intent not to be, if we come up with the definition, would our intent not to be to present it to the commission to adopt, and then the staff and the commission and all the committees would use the same definition, right? We're not just doing this for CARE.
I guess it. I think about this, and I think obviously it's different. Because we're dealing with anti-racism and equity. It's a much more serious topic, but maybe not serious, but challenging. But thinking about the experience with like public art projects and all of those technical things do come before the Public Art Committee and before the commission to be adopted, to be approved. But in that space where the artist is in the community engaging, getting feedback, kind of sharing, there are a number of things that are shared, but not necessarily adopted. So, it allows for the artist to hear and kind of get a feel for the community and kind of discover, and then later on, it does come back to an official committee. It does get voted on based on what the artist is taking that feedback and turning it into their concept. And so I'm wondering if that's again, I'm just saying this out loud. That's how I'm thinking about this process of, we're out in the community, we're engaging around our idea, the idea being this definition, and then with that feedback, we can reel it in and kind of get a feel of how it was received. And then we can have that conversation here. But I mean, obviously that creates a lot of work for staff to kind of go through that and kind of, summarize it and put it into a way that we can actually receive it here in this meeting.
I don't think that's a lot of work. I mean, we were encouraged in the last coffee talk, and Claudia did that specifically as far as taking notes from conversations and stuff. So even if you were there, it wasn't a group discussion that had your input on something that may be official. But as long as we're having conversations, normal conversations, that's just the work that we're already doing. So just as much as we're not circumventing the laws of having the interpretation sent to Josiah to then have this group discussion later, I mean, I may be wrong, but if it's not a concentrated thing and you're in there or Heather's there at these coffee talks, it was encouraging to build that up. I mean, to build that in the next coffee talks and different events that we have, like Josiah was saying. Sorry, I'm getting choked up. I'm down here. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, my main concern about capacity, I think that I can safely speak for the three of us that work most closely on CARE. And also our director is, as far as capacity, it's just members of CARE are doing this for free and are not compensated. So that main concern is you all not taking more than you should be taking because you're already in the volunteer capacity. But in the ways that where we can show up and support, and it already flows with what you do anyway. You all are sitting here right now because you all do this work independently of a government entity. And so in ways where we can enhance that relationship with the community and provide a better channel so that that's informing what we do anyway, that's basically, I think, where our position is.
Yeah, I was going to say I like the idea of the community engagement. And I think, we don't even have to necessarily ask them, same exercise we're doing, but I think we could have questions like, how do we know we reached this? What does this look like? And, maybe that could lead to us having internal rubric or guiding questions to know when this has been achieved. Like, I think, it's a great way to hear about people's lived experiences of this, though. And it can be open-ended. And so then we can just take that and, that can help us create examples of what this looks like, for instance.
I think there potentially, just as we move forward with this, could be a place for the art committee as a representative of kind of more robust community engagement in a different way that is not constrained, right, by what we are constrained by. And in terms of our involvement in care, that kind of comes back, right, to us. So I miss, well, what do I know? I like hearing about what used to happen with the art committee and how engaged it was in the community in that way. And I wonder if there's a way to use this as a kind of pilot, or I don't know. I'll work the door and make sure that commissioners are banned. No, not kidding. But like, we go in one at a time? No, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm making a joke. It's a joke. But anyway, I just want to say I support that.
I do think it's helpful that we clarified for sure that the non-commission members are not beholden to the Open Meetings Act. So thank you. And yeah, however staff can support what engagement looks like for you all, we're happy to.
And I'll add to that too, that we always run everything by Tessa and Metro Legal before we do anything, just to be clear on this. It's always better to ask first.
Yeah, I would just ask that as this committee thinks about the community engagement portion and practice, if there's questions, just send me an email. All right, thanks.
Right. And it just also made me think too, we're talking about meetings with community members, right? That maybe say if there was a survey or something, I mean, that doesn't, I'm assuming necessarily preclude, commissioners from being involved in that to the potentially that legal, like, I'm not sure, but yeah, if there's different ways we're doing it, there could be different ways people could be involved.
I think that's a really good point. I think after being in Metro a long time, I heard a lot of, you hear a lot of feedback like, oh, we hate the surveys. But the surveys can still be very helpful for people who are not able to attend things. So, yeah, definitely thinking about different ways that we can ask the same questions of people who are not there. And even though they can't have a conversation, they can still provide feedback. So it's like both and instead of just either or. So it sounds like, I think I like silence in some of these moments because it means that we're not just like forcing ourselves, because there's a lot of thinking going on. But I as I look at the time, I do want to make sure we're leaving here with something tangible that we can kind of work towards. So I think, I hesitate, but do we try and maybe figure out a way to engage the community around equity, and do we need to have maybe some questions, as Camille was saying, that might help guide that discussion that could be used in a community engaged setting? Or I don't know, how do you all feel the next steps would go for making that happen?
I know there have been like a lot of really important suggestions, both that were shared, that have been discussed at length in this meeting via email, and that have come up and evolved in the course of this. And I'm wondering what it might look like for us to make sure in the context of the minutes, we provide those suggestions, and that can be used to identify how the draft might have evolved since arriving here today. And then what it might look like both in terms of moving, working on that, and the engagement with what we have, like what that looks like. I think building. I think it's, if you all want to decide like whether you have the capacity for, in a future meeting, in the interim, you'll get the minutes and we'll be able to see more of like where things are, what are the suggestions, what are the alternative drafts now based on that, and then think through that, but also be thinking about what might be the best opportunity in the near future to create an engagement for this, like right now, like living document. And with the things that it needs, obviously, like it would be great for this to inform how the guidelines evolve, but also the engagement could also inform ideas for the guidelines. And so being able to like work with them in a certain synergy might be both like practical and energizing for the committee.
I will say in terms of minutes, I'm trying to get minutes out very quickly. So I feel that like by the end of the week, I could have a draft set of minutes for you that people could obviously offer feedback on, but that might capture some of what we've talked about, and that might help with a plan.
So Josiah, if I'm hearing you correct, it's kind of a call in to throw out ideas now so that they can be included in that and received. Is that kind of?
Yeah, like how do you all feel about receiving the suggestions and what's been discussed based on this draft through the minutes, and then using that to as a starting place to figure out what an engagement what might look like, and focusing the energy for the next meeting on both synthesizing these suggestions that we've discussed into the draft, and then also figuring out a time and place and opportunity and method, like the flexibility we have for creating an engagement opportunity to inform that draft or to receive feedback if possible. And in the meantime, we can staff, we can make sure we're doing our homework. We'll be in communication with Tessa about what that might look like, so that we know what what framework we're dealing with when we start figuring out that engagement. And of course, as she's informed you all, if you have a question, don't hesitate to like let us know and reach out to Tessa.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I feel like that also, I don't know if we're getting to the goals part in this conversation still, but I feel like that could be a goal too. Like, hey, we figure out engagement plans for, in this year.
Yeah, so thank you for saying that. Looking at the agenda, I think we've probably exhausted the brainstorming we can do today around our equity definition. But I think it was healthy for me. I definitely have gears turning. But yeah, I mean, if we want to move on to that number 2, prioritizing goals, I think we did establish a goal of one, continuing this work and in terms of defining equity and anti-racism, and then 2 seems to be figuring out a way that we can meaningfully engage the community around this conversation and legally. Are there any additions? Anyone else have something I'm missing? I know maybe we talked about facilitated conversations,
Yeah.
and I know that that's not free. So that's, yeah, we want to, I think it, it could be very beneficial to engage a facilitator, but
Yeah, I think I was thinking not as much around this, but it could involve this too. But thinking about moving to restorative work with a larger community, and that as we move forward this year, like wanting to make that a priority. And I don't know to what degree this committee can support that, or not support it, but has the capacity. But I feel like that work's going to be really important, and it kind of dovetails potentially with some of this community engagement work. But I also think even though we have people on our staff, right, who are so equipped to do that kind of, to do restorative work, that my own thought is that it would be great to have somebody external so that you can participate in the process, because we all need it. Everyone needs it. So I don't have any specific thoughts about that, but I wanted to mention it because I'll probably want to keep mentioning it. And I'd love it if, I don't know what it looks like, but I'll go to bat for a line item for it if we need to, or whatever. So that's what I was thinking in terms of the restorative piece. And then the second thing I was thinking was kind of a framework. I know we have norms as a committee that we use to talk, but and maybe this could come out of some of the restorative work. But I just wonder if that could be something too that we could offer the commission in terms of thinking about ways or norms or structures that we can use to talk about issues. I know Dr. Coleman has been working on thinking about a retreat, and some can work that way. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, is structures that could support us in having these kinds of conversations. I mean the commission, not necessarily us, but all of us maybe.
I'm thinking also that we could also do a maybe an online workshop or something regarding even getting input from the community on the care guidelines too, just suggestions like we are suggesting in person for the definition, but maybe doing it proactively so that we can bring that feedback to you all before that when that topic comes up.
I guess, Commissioner Lefowitz, when you, earlier in the meeting, you were discussing the kind of prototyping this. Is that something that we should maybe set as a goal to do with our care guidelines specifically?
I think I was thinking about the fact that there was a grants committee meeting yesterday, and they mentioned, wanting CARES feedback when we get that. I don't know exactly what the timeline is, but I don't think it'll be long. So I guess that's what I was thinking about, something that we could use as an example that would be in front of us. If we want to start with something more simple, I think that's fine too. But it just might be a laboratory that's kind of what I was thinking.
All right. Thank you for clarifying. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking way too much today. But are there any, I guess I'm curious to know what other committee members have as goals for this body for this fiscal year that we haven't discussed maybe?
I am also curious, kind of going off of what Commissioner Harden said and Commissioner Lefkowitz. I know we've been talking about the intent of the definition and engagement around that. And I think potentially some sort of online engagement around the guidelines or looking ahead to how we can think creatively about updating our guidelines. I'd be interested for any brainstorming around other types of engagement with that as well, similarly to how we're brainstorming around engaging with the definitions.
And for clarity, when you say guidelines, are you talking about the grant ones or just the CARE guidelines?
So the CARE guidelines, for sure. I think that might be the natural next step, is updating those so we have a firm foundation going into whatever the committee's involvement with grants looks like. Yeah.
I guess for me, the most challenging part about that is doing that in real time together. And I think it was helpful that we have comments, and maybe with the guidelines, it would be more redlining the document itself, and then I don't know, somehow combining that. I mean, I have experienced us going through guidelines like this, similar to the way we're looking at the definition, and you know, just literally going through it. Oh, we should change this. We should change that. But I think the biggest thing, I think the hurdle is we have to have consensus between us, and that eventually we have to accept, you know, and that's not easy. But I guess I'm wondering if there are ideas of how we do that in a way that's productive, but also maintaining, you know, our rightful, you know, separation when we're not meeting here. Is that redlining a Word document and then sending, and then we show up at the meeting and everyone's comments are there and we literally go through yes, and because I think it's easier to accept actual changes versus, you know, us kind of, especially with the guidelines, I think it'll be easier for us to actually provide alternative language. Yes, that looks, are we all in consensus with that? But yeah, I'm just, sorry, throwing that out there.
No, I think that's great. Tessa, what does it look like from the legal perspective? What things do we have to be mindful of in terms of updating the committee guidelines?
When you say from the legal perspective, can you explain that?
Do the guidelines go through some sort of process of being approved? Are there things that we should be mindful to include or to not include?
So truthfully, I'll have to do some research to see if at any point the full commission essentially adopted or ratified the CARE guidelines to move forward with that. Obviously, the bylaws are next in order or precedent regarding guidance, but the bylaws are pretty scarce in regards to the CARE committee. So I would just need to look at historically what the commission has done.
Thank you.
Now that I put her on the spot.
I'm struggling here with the thought that, you know, going through the guidelines and striking out editing is fine. My concern is that we're still going to have to ask the question, how does CARE function? What's its premise? What's its purpose? What's its reach? The magic of the art team was that we weren't a committee of the commission. And so we were free to do what we needed to, meet when we needed to, we researched, so we did a lot of stuff, but we were able to do that because of our structure at that time. Once we became a committee of the commission, we became bound by those rules. And we're going to have to contend with what that means versus what we would like to see happen. Those may not be the same things. They may be related, but they may not be the same things.
I'm just putting this out there, but is there a situation where we envision moving back to that model? Is that something that...
It's a lovely aspiration, and I'm not going to say no, but it really is going to, I'm going to leave some stuff out and leave some intention out, but to kind of compact it, our team was able, and ultimately CARE, the early stages of CARE, were able to identify or receive issues of inequitable behavior of the agency upon community. And we were able to, we had the ability to deliberate on those issues and make recommendations to the commission. If we can still do that and include the engagement that we've talked about, and that sounds like a lovely way of having both perspectives to mirror each other, to have those tools to work with, but what does it look like? What does it mean to be able to be that? We weren't legal by any means, but we were perspective. We were amplifying what we either witnessed, were subjected to, or what was brought to us.
It's interesting. Something I'm thinking about, and I feel like I'm talking so much, but I'll share it. I wonder, I think for today's meeting, we identified work needs to be done. And for that, I think my first instinct was like, let's meet more. Like, let's meet again next month. Let's do this again. And I just am putting this out there. Is there a model where this committee meets less to allow more time for a potential art team to meet in between, to where it's not, does that make, like, to where we're not necessarily coming here every month or every other month to have those conversations, but maybe like we have goals that we set, and then we allow that to be, and then return. And maybe we're not there yet, but maybe that's an idea for when we do go through those guidelines and talk about how it works, and maybe that's something that is a part of the model where, and it is challenging because we're a part of the commission, so we are accountable to providing, to meeting and to like doing the work that we're set out to do. So yeah, that's just brainstorming.
I think looking at other agencies, other organizations, other cooperative relationships with the legal department, and seeing what boundaries can be flexed in order to accomplish that is one way of going after it.
But even when we first transitioned to CARE, we still met once a month. We still actually, non-commissioners still met and had informal discussions. And every every commission meeting, we made a report. In the last year and a half, we haven't been able to do that. We were dropped down to every other month, right? And then at one point, they even talked about dropping us down to a quarterly meeting. And we no longer made presentations to the commission. I think the commissioner, because we had the community co-chair, and I think the commissioner started making reports to the commission, but they weren't the in-depth kind of reports we used to be able to do.
So that's thank you for bringing that. That's another tenet of the ability to address openly is the relationship with the commission. And that we've never successfully gotten all the way where we had goals, we had aspirations for being able to do that, and the need was there. But we never quite got to the point where we had the ability to be present in commission meetings and engage with the commission and relate, not just make the recommendations, but actually have a conversation.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's.
But we do need to define what care is and what our responsibilities are, because how can we bring new people on to do the work if we can't even define what it is we're supposed to be doing? We used to know, but we don't know anymore.
A conversation we have had as staff is being really mindful of and towing the line of not asking additional free labor of the community members on the committee. And I'm wondering what it may look like for CARE to re-engage with the commission, to be presenting at commission meetings, to be on the agenda in a more robust way without burdening you all with more work or extra labor.
Well, I think I've been doing this kind of work for 50 years at least, and I think most of us, all of us probably are on here because we care desperately about equity and some of the things that have been going on in this community. I moved here in 1970, and I've seen change, and then I've seen change roll back, and then I've seen change that never happened. So I think everyone is on this committee because they really care about it.
I mean, I guess I'm also thinking the labor burden may lessen too if there are more people on this committee, and then also if we're clear about the kind of decision making that happens here. So then it could be like, oh, maybe it's a wrong word, but subcommittee of CARE that's like doing this presentation and so forth. And so I think that's possible. And Ellen, I like what McCormick too, as far as I'm trying to do the Terry, yes. I like the idea of getting more clarity on what we do.
These minutes are going to be a movie. It's going to be
Yeah.
I think this is helpful. I know it. I think my struggle is sometimes with these. We're so action oriented in these commission spaces that these meetings kind of we leave and we're like, well, we don't have any action item. But I think it's. I don't know if you all feel it this way as well, but I feel like the goals are starting to show themselves as we have more conversation, and the priority of those goals, I think, especially, and I like the idea of prototyping, and I know that like the grants, it might be time sensitive and that's coming up soon, but it feels like, okay, we really need to just focus on what are we asking from CARE, and kind of figuring that out so that we can actually get to the work. I think we're in a space where a lot of change is happening within the organization or within the department. And yeah, I appreciate you all for kind of bringing that up and reminding, myself and others of like the experience that you once had and how it feels to you now. And yeah, I think I'm thinking about commission meetings. We do have an agenda item every meeting, but my update has just been a brief, we're working, y'all, but actually being able to formally present and be taken seriously, I think is definitely important. But yeah, I'm gonna stop speaking so much for the rest of the meeting. But.
Can I ask?
So-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Could I ask a legal question about open meetings? And I was thinking about discussing, like when we discuss the grant guidelines when they're brought, are we in compliance if we break up into smaller groups, like 2 or 3, and discuss and use chart paper and make it like you know what I'm saying? Or do we have to sit like, not that I don't like sitting like this and looking at you all, but in terms of being generative, in terms of having some smaller conversations?
Essentially, workshop within the meeting. I don't have a definitive answer to that at this point. I can't say that I've seen any case law related to that. I think that if that was what this committee wanted to do, the important part would be presenting what was discussed in those small workshops in the full committee forum. Because, again, the spirit of the Open Meetings Act is transparency to our citizens and our constituents.
With respect for everyone's time, as we're 8 minutes out, I think maybe revisiting a summary of what we'd like to look forward to for the next meeting, if people have capacity for a meeting next month, and also thinking about how we'll through the minutes provide the updates suggested for the definition. Have in mind to come back when you meet again, being able to have reviewed those notes and thinking about what the definition may look based on that. Thinking about what and we can do the research and work and check-ins with Tessa in the meantime to figure out what opportunities, like what scope of engagement might look like for that language, and potentially for the guidelines, and quite frankly in thinking about the big picture questions about the function, like the purpose of care. How is that specified, like in what it does, what our team originally did, what has changed and what's been lost, like the reporting opportunities, and to what extent that could be discussed as a part of the meeting, but also in how that might also be informed by engagement and thinking about what care is best equipped to do right now and what it can do, and set that, if we could set that forth in the forthcoming agenda in an early draft, and check it with our director and also with you all, and then go from there. And of course, as far as like the meeting time, we go through the usual doodle poll inquiry, and if you all have issues or if there are any questions or concerns you have, like we're available to speak with you directly to try to make sure we can get the best time in place for everyone.
Will those emails be incorporated, the additional email comments that we wanted to The emails? Those emails?
Can we
new
provide
sentences.
those to you
Yes,
to incorporate
thank you.
into the minutes?
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Sorry, to make sure I'm understanding that clearly, you're asking to if we can incorporate the emails in the minutes. Is that right? Am I?
Send the emails to me so that I can, if I have a question upon reviewing the minutes and I'm incorporating some of the language that people suggested, I have it.
Yes.
Cool.
I do have one more thought. It might be welcomed, but in thinking about this, I do feel like I don't want to let the conversation about community co-chair get too beyond us as we start to work through this, because I think that could be key without throwing anyone under the bus. I just think that that could be really important in establishing how care is working, and maybe that is also a key aspect of how maybe it functioned before that made it more effective. But that's all I have to say. I just want to say that and include it in the minutes so that it is known, and that we don't lose sight of that. Because I think for me, I struggle being the only chair in this space, because I think it's really important that I'm not the only one, and in order for care to operate, I think, the way that it was envisioned to.
Are we going to be making recommendations, nominating people, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, I think that can be a part of the discussion next meeting.
I also think that's something that we can look at in the guidelines, and if there needs to be language updated or a process more clearly laid out of what nominating or appointing a co-chair looks like, I think there's an opportunity to do that there as well.
I could also send the guidelines out with the minutes so everybody could see that if you don't have them that way, if that's going to be added to the agenda.
Are there any other items for new or old business that anyone would like to bring?
I just have a question. And that question is, we're working on the definition of equity. And is there a point in time where we'll be working on the definition of anti-racism or not?
I think so. I think, yes. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that's the intention, at least clarifying how that relates to the definition of equity and the practices of anti-racism. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I hesitate to just say, yeah, we're going to do that next meeting.
No. It just wasn't discussed at all, and I was led to believe that both terms, both were under consideration.
Yes, I think that's the intention, but I think we just have not gotten to that point where we've actually brought anti-racism as a definition to the conversation. But absolutely, that's the intention, is to have both definitions.
I have just an administrative question. You're doing the minutes or you're doing the minutes? I heard you both mention doing the minutes.
Collaborative, but I pretty much
I
do
was
them. We collaborate.
Are there any other items, new or old business? Well, thank you all for today's robust discussion. I appreciate you all for being here. With that being said, I will happily call this meeting adjourned. Thank you. I don't think I need a motion. Okay.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.